It was a bright, sunny Saturday when I decided to host a small gathering at my private lakefront property. The water sparkled like glass under the sun, and the gentle breeze carried the faint scent of pine and fresh grass. I had been looking forward to this all week, friends, laughter, and the kind of relaxation that only comes when you're surrounded by nature and people you trust. My dock stretched out over the water, and I had set up a few chairs, a small grill, and even a cooler stocked with drinks. Everything was perfect, and for the first few hours, it was. Guests arrived mid-morning, parking their cars along the gravel path I had cleared for visitors. Kids ran toward the water with inflatable tubes, adults settled into folding chairs, and someone started playing a guitar softly under a tree. The mood was light, the kind of scene that makes you forget about deadlines, HOA regulations, and everything else that usually weighs on you. I felt a rare, untroubled happiness watching my friends laugh and dip their toes into the lake. That's when she appeared. Karen. HOA Karen, as she had earned her nickname in the neighborhood. She was striding down the path toward my property like she owned the place, clipboard in hand and a disapproving frown set firmly on her face. Her sunglasses reflected the sunlight, hiding whatever judgmental thoughts were racing through her mind. I had seen her at meetings before, the type who thrived on control and correcting everyone else's behavior. She had a way of making you feel small, like every rule she enforced was carved in stone and any challenge to it was sacrilege. I walked up to greet her, trying to keep my tone polite. "Hey Karen, how's it going?" She didn't answer with a greeting. Instead, she waved her clipboard at my guests and said, "Excuse me, you can't be here. This area is restricted to homeowners only, and you don't have permission to bring guests onto the lake. You need to leave immediately." I froze for a moment, the words sinking in. What I said? This is my private property. I own this land, including the lakefront. These are my guests, and they are welcome here. Her expression didn't change, if anything, it became more severe. That may be your property on paper, but the lake and surrounding access are governed by HOA rules. You can't just allow unrestricted use. There are regulations, liability issues, and fees that you haven't paid. You're in violation, and I'm going to have to report this. I could feel my jaw tightening, and a wave of disbelief washed over me. She actually thought she could dictate who could and couldn't step onto land that I had legally purchased. "Karen," I said calmly but firmly, "this is private land. Not the community park, not the common area, not the HOA grounds. It belongs to me. You do not have the authority to tell my friends to leave my property." She took a step closer, still holding her clipboard like it was a weapon. "You think your ownership gives you the right to bypass HOA rules? We're responsible for the safety and management of all water access in this neighborhood. You can't just ignore that." I took a deep breath, trying not to let my rising frustration show too much. I had encountered her before, and her favorite tactic was to overwhelm people with talk about regulations and responsibilities, hoping they'd back down out of fear. "Karen," I repeated, my voice firmer this time, "you can spout whatever rules you want, but this lakefront is on my deed. You are trespassing if you continue to interfere. I own this land. I have every right to host guests here, and if you try to kick them off, you are in violation of trespassing laws." Her face shifted slightly, and I noticed the tiniest flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. She wasn't used to being confronted with actual legal ownership. Her authority had always gone unchallenged in our neighborhood. That can't be right," she stammered. "The HOA governs all lake access." I shook my head slowly. "Karen, I've gone through all the property lines, all the deeds, all the county records. This lakefront is mine. I've even confirmed with the surveyor that the water line and surrounding land fall entirely under my property. The HOA has no jurisdiction here. I could see the color drain slightly from her face. Her usual confident, aggressive posture was faltering. She opened her mouth to respond but seemed to struggle to find words. My guests, sensing the tension, stopped what they were doing and watched silently, some whispering to each other. The contrast between her forceful entrance and her sudden uncertainty was almost comical, though I kept a straight face to maintain control of the situation. I continued, trying to make my point clear to both Karen and anyone else who might think she had power over private property. Let me be crystal clear. You do not have the authority to tell my friends to leave. You do not have the right to enforce HOA rules on land that I own. If you attempt to remove anyone or interfere with my event, you are trespassing. I suggest you step back and let this gathering continue peacefully. She shifted uneasily on her feet, glancing around at the lake, the dock, the laughing guests, and finally back at me. It was like watching someone slowly realize they had misjudged a situation entirely. For a moment, she was frozen, a mixture of shock and disbelief on her face. She had spent years wielding imagined authority, and now it was evaporating in front of her. The silence stretched for a few seconds that felt like hours. I could almost hear her mind racing, recalculating all the ways she had overstepped. I didn't say anything, didn't move. I just stood there, calm and steady, letting the legal reality of the situation sink in. Finally, she muttered something under her breath and took a hesitant step back. I could see the retreat in her posture, a clear acknowledgement that she had lost this battle. Without another word, she turned and walked back toward the path leading out of the property, still clutching her clipboard as if it might somehow defend her against the truth. I exhaled slowly, feeling the tension leave my body. My guests, who had been watching the confrontation, began to relax again, laughter and chatter returning to the lakefront. Children splashed in the water once more, the guitar strumming resumed, and the grill's sizzle brought back the normal rhythm of the day. I stayed where I was for a moment longer, looking at Karen's retreating figure and feeling a quiet satisfaction. The HOA's so-called power had frozen under the weight of truth. Later, I walked down to the dock and looked out across the water, reflecting on the encounter. Owning land isn't just about deeds and boundaries, it's about the responsibility to stand firm when someone tries to bully you, to protect your space and the people you invite into it. Karen had tried to assert control, but she had underestimated knowledge, preparation, and the legal reality of private property. By the time the sun began to set, painting the lake in warm shades of orange and pink, I had returned to my friends, joining them in laughter and stories. The lake was calm, my property was secure, and Karen's interruption had become a small, almost humorous memory compared to the serenity and freedom of the afternoon. I realized then that asserting your rights isn't about confrontation, it's about clarity, calm confidence, and letting the truth speak for itself. Today, the lake belonged to me and anyone I welcomed without question, and for the first time in a long while, I felt completely at peace with that power. The day after the confrontation at the lake, I woke up with a sense of satisfaction, but I also knew the fight wasn't over. Karen had retreated, yes, but people like her never simply disappeared when their authority had been challenged. I could already hear the whispers among neighbors, the speculation about what had happened at my property. Some admired me for standing my ground, others, predictably, were anxious, unsure how to navigate a situation where an HOA leader had been exposed as overstepping her bounds. I poured myself a cup of coffee and looked out over the water, watching the early morning fog rise from the lake. My property felt serene, but I knew that serenity was fragile. I decided to take proactive measures. If Karen thought she could intimidate me once, she might try again, and this time she might not come alone. I spent the morning reviewing my property boundaries, surveying the land again with a digital map and marking key access points where someone might attempt to enforce rules or cause a scene. I also contacted a local attorney to discuss my rights in more detail, especially concerning any potential retaliation from the HOA. Legal protection, I realized, wasn't just a formality, it was a necessity. The attorney confirmed everything I already knew: the land and lakefront were mine, the HOA had no jurisdiction, and anyone trying to interfere could face legal consequences. After the consultation, I called a few close friends who had been at the lake the day before and invited them over for a small planning session. I wanted to ensure that if Karen returned or tried to interfere with guests, we'd be prepared. Some neighbors had suggested I put up private property signs, but I decided against making it overtly confrontational. Instead, we focused on discreet measures, reminding guests where property lines began, making sure everyone knew their rights while on my land, and even creating a basic contact list of who could be called if any harassment occurred. By the time my friends arrived, I had already set up chairs by the dock, the grill warming, and a thermos of coffee ready. The morning passed uneventfully, the lake calm and welcoming as usual. My friends and I joked about Karen's dramatic retreat, each of us imagining the stunned expression on her face as I told her she had no authority. But as the afternoon sun climbed, I noticed movement on the path leading to the lake. A familiar glare and the sharp tap of heels against the gravel immediately caught my attention. Karen had returned. She was not alone this time. 2 board members trailed behind her, holding clipboards and looking unsure. Her sunglasses couldn't hide her determination. She walked with purpose, as if she still believed she had the right to enforce her imagined rules. I stood up and approached her calmly, hands at my sides. "Karen," I said evenly, back so soon her eyes narrowed, and she didn't answer at first, instead gesturing toward my guests. "You cannot have unauthorized people here," she said, her voice loud enough for the whole area to hear. "This lake is under HOA oversight, and you are violating regulations by hosting an unapproved gathering." I took a slow breath, letting the words settle into the morning air. "Once again, Karen, this is private property. I own this land. These are my friends. You do not have the authority to dictate what happens here. Any further attempts to remove my guests would constitute trespassing." Her expression faltered slightly, a flicker of doubt passing over her face, but she quickly masked it with defiance. "That can't be right. The HOA has always governed lake access. Rules are rules. We're responsible for monitoring the area and ensuring compliance." I shook my head and gestured at the surrounding trees and the sparkling water. "Karen, I have reviewed my deeds, my survey, and the property lines. This lakefront is mine, legally, and the HOA has no jurisdiction here. I suggest you leave before the situation escalates." At this point, her 2 board members shifted uncomfortably. They glanced at each other, clearly unsure whether to intervene. I noticed a subtle hesitation in Karen's step, but she quickly tried to regain control. "You think ownership gives you carte blanche," she said, her voice rising slightly. "You can't just ignore community rules. Liability, insurance, safety, this is serious." I leaned slightly forward, keeping my tone calm but firm. "I've considered all of that. Liability insurance covers my property and my gatherings. Safety is ensured with supervision, and I am fully responsible for my guests. None of your community rules apply here, and anyone attempting to enforce them without my consent is breaking the law." For a moment, the air seemed to freeze. Karen's lips parted as if to argue, but she didn't speak. Her board members exchanged glances, and one of them whispered something under his breath. She looked around, realizing her usual threats had little effect. The confidence she normally wielded like armor seemed to vanish in the face of clear legal authority. I could see her calculating, trying to find some angle that would give her control again, but there was none. I allowed a moment of silence to stretch, letting the reality of the situation sink in for everyone present. Then I continued, softer but no less firm, "I am asking you one last time to step off my property. You are not welcome here. Any further interference will be documented and reported to the authorities. This is my land, my guests, and my responsibility." Karen's shoulders stiffened, and she finally stepped back. She muttered something under her breath, something about escalating this and legal review, but she didn't make any attempt to approach the lake or my guests again. The board members followed her retreating figure, and soon they disappeared down the path, leaving us in peace. My friends exhaled collectively, laughter and murmurs of relief spreading along the dock. The tension melted back into the rhythm of the day, the water lapping gently against the shore, the faint strum of the guitar, the smell of grilling food. I spent the rest of the afternoon making sure my property was secure, but also enjoying the sense of vindication. The lake, the dock, and the surrounding land had been challenged, and yet, standing firm, I had protected not only my legal rights but the freedom and enjoyment of my guests. It was a lesson in patience, preparation, and confidence. Ownership is not just a matter of deeds on paper, it's about understanding your rights and being willing to assert them calmly and decisively. By evening, the sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, reflecting off the lake. My friends sat on the dock, talking quietly and laughing softly, the tension of earlier hours completely dissipated. Karen's attempted interference had become almost a story to tell, a demonstration of what happens when someone mistakes authority for entitlement. I realized that day how important it was not only to know your property lines but to be prepared to defend them, not with aggression, but with clarity, confidence, and legal certainty. As the sun dipped below the tree line and the first stars began to glimmer over the water, I felt a sense of peace. The confrontation had tested me, but it had also reminded me why I valued this place so much. My private lake, my dock, my land, it was not just a piece of property, it was a sanctuary. And I had proven, not just to Karen, but to myself, that protecting it was not about confrontation alone, but about standing firm with knowledge, preparation, and unwavering calm. The lake belonged to me, my friends belonged here, and no one, not even the most arrogant HOA officer, could change that. The next morning, the lakefront felt almost surreal in its quietness. The sun rose over the water, painting it in soft hues of gold and pink, and the gentle ripple of the waves seemed to echo the calm I had fought so hard to reclaim. My property was peaceful again, my guests gone, leaving only the lingering scent of lake water, pine, and the faint smoke from yesterday's grill. It was a kind of serenity that felt earned, the kind that comes after standing up to someone who had thought they could impose their will on your life. But even in that quiet, I knew the battle wasn't fully over. Karen's retreat yesterday had been temporary, and I had learned long ago that she never accepted defeat gracefully. I spent the morning walking along the edge of the lake, surveying the land with a sense of pride and vigilance. The property lines were clear in my mind now, etched into both memory and legal documents. I made a mental note of access points, considering how anyone might try to challenge me again, and I checked that all my gates and pathways were secure. I also called my attorney to confirm that any future attempts by Karen or the HOA to interfere could be met with legal action. The attorney assured me that my position was rock solid, the land belonged to me, I had every right to host guests, and the HOA had no jurisdiction over private property. The reassurance felt good, but it was also a reminder that preparation and vigilance were as important as legal rights. Later that morning, I began receiving text messages from neighbors. Some were congratulatory, thanking me for standing up to Karen and her heavy-handed tactics. Others were curious or anxious, unsure how the HOA would respond after being publicly challenged. I replied politely, emphasizing that I had acted within my rights and that my intention was simply to protect my property and guests. I didn't want anyone panicking or thinking that the lakefront was now a battleground. It wasn't. It was, and would remain, a place of peace for those I chose to welcome. By early afternoon, I heard the familiar sound of footsteps along the gravel path leading to my property. I glanced up from the dock where I had been checking the condition of the shoreline and saw Karen approaching again. This time, she was accompanied by 3 other HOA members, all of them carrying clipboards and wearing expressions of forced determination. Her posture was stiff, her sunglasses reflecting the sunlight in sharp angles. She clearly believed she could make another stand, and perhaps, in her mind, reassert some semblance of control. I greeted her calmly. "Back so soon, Karen?" I asked, my tone neutral but firm. She ignored the greeting, focusing instead on my guests, who were gathering in small groups along the dock. "You cannot allow unauthorized people on this lake. You're violating HOA rules, and you will be held accountable," she said loudly, projecting authority she clearly hoped would intimidate. I stepped forward, letting my calm confidence do the work that anger could not. "Once again, this is my private property. These are my guests. I own this land, including the lakefront. Your so-called HOA rules do not apply here. Any further attempt to remove my guests would constitute trespassing." Her mouth opened, then closed, and I could see her faltering slightly. The 2 board members flanking her exchanged uneasy glances, as if they were beginning to understand that this confrontation was not going the way they expected. She recovered quickly, trying to assert herself. "The HOA governs all community lake access," she said. "You cannot simply ignore your obligations. There are safety protocols, insurance requirements, and liability concerns." I shook my head slowly, gesturing toward the sparkling water and the surrounding trees. "I have confirmed with legal counsel and reviewed all property deeds and surveys. This land is mine, legally, from the water line to the tree line. The HOA has no authority here, and no regulations you cite can override my ownership. I suggest you leave now before this escalates further." Her expression tightened, and I could see the first cracks in her confidence. For so long, she had relied on fear and assumed authority to control situations. Now, faced with indisputable legal reality and my unshakable calm, her usual tactics were ineffective. One of her board members, a younger man who had never seemed comfortable enforcing rules in the first place, whispered something that I couldn't hear, but it was enough to make Karen pause. She looked around, her posture stiffening, the sense of control slipping from her like sand through fingers. I allowed a few moments of silence to stretch, letting everyone present absorb the reality of the situation. My guests, initially tense, now relaxed, their laughter and chatter returning in small waves. I stepped closer to Karen, lowering my voice just enough to be heard but without aggression. "I am giving you one final warning. Step off my property. You do not have the right to interfere with my guests or the use of my land. Any further attempts will be documented and reported. I have legal evidence, property deeds, and the support of the county to ensure my rights are protected. This is not negotiable." Her face turned pale, and for the first time, I saw fear flash in her eyes. Her entire body language shifted, shoulders slumped slightly, hands gripping the clipboard as if for stability. The bravado she had worn so long was gone. Karen was frozen, caught between the desire to assert control and the reality that she had none. The other board members hesitated, unsure whether to challenge me or retreat with her. It was a moment of perfect stillness, the kind that confirms who truly holds power. Finally, she muttered something unintelligible, then turned and began walking back down the path, followed by her hesitant board members. They did not look back, their retreat as silent as it was defeated. I watched them leave, a quiet satisfaction settling over me. My guests cheered softly, some clapping in relief, but I simply nodded, my expression calm. The battle was over, at least for now, and the lakefront had returned to the peace it deserved. The rest of the afternoon passed without incident. I helped my friends set up a small picnic on the grass, the children splashing in the lake without fear of interruption. The breeze carried laughter and conversation across the water, and the dock creaked gently under the weight of folding chairs and conversations. The sunlight reflected off the lake, casting golden ripples that danced along the shore. I felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that the land and the people I cared about were safe under my watch. As the sun began to lower in the sky, painting the lake in warm oranges and purples, I walked along the water's edge alone for a moment, reflecting on the events of the day. Confrontation is never easy, and asserting one's rights can be exhausting, but the rewards are tangible. I had protected my property, upheld the law, and ensured that those who came to enjoy the lake with me could do so without fear of interference. Karen's attempts to control my land had failed, and in the process, I had reminded myself of the importance of knowledge, preparation, and calm confidence. By evening, the lakefront had returned to its quiet rhythm. Guests had left, but the water remained clear and still, the surrounding trees whispering softly in the breeze. I sat on the dock with a cup of coffee, watching the reflection of the sky on the surface of the lake. The confrontation with Karen had been a test, a measure of how far someone would go to protect their rights and how effectively intimidation can be met with calm resolve. It was also a lesson in power. True authority comes not from assumed control, but from understanding your legal position and standing firm with clarity and confidence. As darkness fell, I felt a profound sense of closure. The lake was mine, my property secured, and Karen's interference had been neutralized. I realized that defending one's land and guests is not about aggression, it is about preparation, awareness, and the courage to assert your rights calmly and decisively. The peace that returned to my lakefront that evening was not merely the absence of confrontation, it was the affirmation of ownership, responsibility, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that truth and law prevail over arrogance and assumed power.